Welcome to Deep Look. We're live on YouTube every single week, Tuesday, noon Eastern. Today is July 23rd. I'm Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner, as we're into the heart of the summer. The World Junior Championships are underway over in the UK. We've got the US Open right around the corner. Club season is in full swing. And we're on the road to the World Championships coming up at the end of August. It's an exciting time. UFA playoffs about to start, Keith. But is anything crazier than what's going on in the presidential election in the U.S. right now? I feel like the last 3 weeks has been like, this is going to be in like a chapter in the history books 100 years from now.
It's one of those things where it's like every 2 weeks, it's like something that's never happened before, or we've never been
Every
in
2
this
weeks.
situation
It's like
before.
every
Happens.
other day.
Yeah, and so like the landscape is constantly shifting, which is uncomfortable, right? You can't really find a lot of purchase for getting a sense of what's going to happen next, and I don't know if that unpredictability is necessarily healthy for the electoral democratic process, but it's what we got.
It's insane. I mean, since this morning, the Secret Service director resigned following the assassination attempt of Trump. Of course, over the weekend, Joe Biden decided that he was going to drop out as the nominee. And we're, waiting to see whether Kamala gets the nomination, which presumably she will. But, Keith, I mean, who knows? Like, what's next in this story?
I am probably better at prognosticating Frisbee than what's going to happen in this, because this has been pretty wild, and
We have
I'm not
like
that good at prognosticating Frisbee to start with.
3.5 months more of this election. Felt like nothing was happening, and then it all happened at once. Wow, wild times. Right, we're right in the midst of World Juniors. We'll get into that a little bit later. Before that, so Keith, the WNBA had their All-Star game over the weekend, and they did something that we have been dreaming about in Ultimate for
Yeah,
so long, which is that they took Team USA that will compete to represent the United States at the Olympics, and they put them up against the best of the rest, Team WNBA. And Keith, what happens?
Team WNBA goes out and gets the dub, led by Arika Gubawale, who's like an electrifying guard. So that was actually pretty sweet to watch. And you're right, it like encapsulates what we think could be compelling for both spectators and for the players in getting a competition between these two teams. I think there's a lot of respect between the players, but you also know there's probably a little bit of a chip on some people's shoulders, like, hey, I wish I had gotten picked. And so let me go out and show the coaches and these other players on Team USA why they're going to miss me. And it was a pretty exciting game. You saw the whole thing about obviously everything, every narrative in the WNBA somehow in major media ties back to Caitlin Clark, but there's a story going around about them trying to sub her back in for Agubawale, and Caitlin Clark was like, no, no, leave her out there.
I don't follow all the ins and outs of all this drama, although it is all over the social media feeds with Caitlin Clark just everywhere. If we did this for Ultimate right now, right? So you have your Worlds teams, and then you get to pick a team to compete in each of the divisions. Could your team upset the Worlds team?
It's definitely possible. I think that you can build a good enough team with U.S. talent that's not playing in the world teams to
No
beat
cheating.
one of those teams. I don't think it would
You
be
can't
a
pick people
favorite.
who didn't apply. You can't pick people who
Oh,
didn't
okay.
apply.
No,
Like
yeah,
no
I
Joe
still
White.
think you could build a
Otherwise,
team
that's
that
not
could win.
fair.
You could still build a team that could win. I don't know why you can't pick. Why is that not fair? That you
Because
can't
he
use
didn't
Joe
try
White.
out.
I mean, this
If he had tried out, he would have made the
all these
team.
other. I do think the tryout team could still, even if you limited it to just tryouts, it could. I wouldn't make them the favorites, but they will be good enough to win. Especially if the U.S. team is like restricted by the fact that they have to work on stuff that's going to be useful later, and the other team gets to be a little more free flowing. No pressure on you too.
Oh, imagine the pressure. The ratings on that would be sky high. We should do it. We should do it.
I mean, we've
All-star
seen
all-star
similar
team at
things.
US Open versus the US national teams. We could do it every time.
I've already kind of floated the idea that maybe this should be part of the World Games process. Is in the off years, we should have like a World Game style tournament with teams that are constructed by the selection committee or whatnot.
That'd be
And,
sick.
they could use it as a way to fundraise or something.
I would love that. All right. Well, give us a like and a subscribe wherever you are listening to this, whether that's on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. It is time for the trivia question of the week.
All right, our trivia question of the week. It is World Juniors time right now, and the U.S. U20 teams are off to a great start as they would be projected to. There's even a bagel already served up by the U.S. But while they are the favorites, they don't win every time. When is the last time that a U20 U.S. national team lost at the World Junior Ultimate Championships?
I'm going to say the only one that I can remember in recent memory is Canada Open over the US with the Darren Wu Sky. I don't remember what year that was, like 2013 or something like that. It was a long time ago now. That's my
That's taking
answer.
it back. Okay. The Darren Wu Sky, which is an epic moment. I love that it's like it to me, it now lives on in its legacy because it's in the Huck and A intro. So I love
Yes,
that you
yes.
still get to hear that
Iconic
electrifying
Canadian
moment.
moment.
Yeah. Great times. Great times. But the last time the Darren Wu call in the chat as well. The last time that a US team lost was actually more recent than that. It was in Poland in 2016. The
Oh,
women's division team lost in the final to Canada. That
I
was
do vaguely
the
remember
Mott
that.
twins. The Mott
Oh, yes.
twins and Anushka Beaudry and Sarah Jacobson.
Who was on the
That was a good team.
2016 junior girls team that year? Let's take a look. Some big names from that team. Caitlin Lee, Kate Lanier, Marie Perivier, Clea Paklemba, Claire Trope, Jack Berzu, Carly Campana. It's kind of crazy they didn't win.
I mean, you feel that way anytime that an American team doesn't win. I feel like the rosters always look stacked, but this Canadian team is pretty good too.
To be fair, the like back half of this roster is a bunch of names that I don't know. So maybe some questionable selections, including Caroline Tornquist getting left off the team.
I was gonna say I thought you were calling Caroline
And
Torquist a questionable selection. I was like,
Akane
I don't know about
Akane
that.
Kleinkopf also left off the team. Yikes. Mott twins.
Hey, maybe they wouldn't be who they are today if it wasn't for being spurred, being motivated.
Getting snubbed. That's a good point. This year's teams are so stacked. The U.S. women's team just had a super tight game that finished up maybe 25 minutes ago. They were playing Italy for the top of the pool, and it was 10-10, Keith. And then the U.S. won 15-10.
Yeah, they basically wrapped it up with a massive pull all the way to the back line. I think it was Jaja Gelfin with the pull, all the way to the back line and first throw Callahan on a floaty pass into a pack, which I think was Opal Burris caught the Callahan. That made it 13-10, and that felt like it basically locked it up.
That will send the U.S. women through to I guess it's not to the semis yet. Do they go to power pools? Yeah, they go to power pools. So they're at the top of the power pool. and then we play some more games there, and then they cut to semifinals in the women's division. So, any other some other stories to mention real quick before we move on from this?
What are the other ones that jump out to you right now?
I've just been kind of, it's always hard early, especially in these pool play rounds where you're not really seeing the best teams face off right away.
Yeah.
I tend to take a look at like goal differential as kind of a proxy for quality. Interesting to see that in the open division, Canada, France, USA, Italy, and New Zealand all have really strong goal differentials, 20 over 20. US is actually third on that list. But they also played one fewer game, so that's probably going to go up. They should probably be considered number one. So that's compelling. I mean, I think the U.S. getting pushed a little bit by Italy is pretty interesting. You've got France also looking really strong, Canada looking really strong. France's point diff is actually better than the USA's, so keep an eye on that. And I don't know, Canada just looks really good across the board. I think it's definitely possible we could see a Canadian upset over the US in at least one of these divisions.
That was probably my initial takeaway, is that it's been a great start for Canada. I know that there's been some Canada negativity flying around. I know that the folks over who work with Huck and A, look at us and say, why are they always trashing Canada these days? But this has been a great start for the Canadian teams. We'll see if they can hold it up. And maybe a little disappointing for me for GB. The host team thought they might come out strong in the open division. They're 1-2 with a -12 point diff. And in the women's division, they're 2-2 with a -7. So not an ideal start for GB.
Shout out to our scoring leaders so far. Totals per game. Nicholas Gonzalez for Columbia Open, averaging 6.7 goals and assists combined per game. Over in the women's division, Lucrezia Grossi for the Italians, averaging 4.5. And in the mixed division, Jelte Dirks, I don't know if I'm saying that right, for Netherlands, averaging 6 a game. So cool to keep an eye on some of the stars from around the world. Make sure you're tuning in all week long on Ultiworld to the juniors competition. We start to really get into the meat of this tournament starting tomorrow as we kind of move more into power pools, and we start to see some early bracket games as well. So stay tuned to ultiworld.com for all the action.
You won't be surprised to hear the stat leaders just from the US. I'll give you just on the mixed team. It's Sam Grossberg. On the
no surprise
open teams, Cedar Hines, and on the women's team, Julia Kimi. So no shockers with some big names from the US youth scene leading the way right now.
Yep. HSNI leaders right there. I mean, if you did full stats, I think you'd see the same thing at HSNI. Very, very, very strong players. All right, it's time to welcome in our friend of the show, fellow podcaster, Pat Stegemoeller. Pat is a former Rochester Dragon. He's the host of the Huck and Hope podcast. And Pat, I actually pulled some stats from your Dragons career. And I was like, I wonder how he did, like, plus minus wise on this team as a member of the Dragons. And I had to kind of scroll down the leaderboard a little bit. You came in at a historic -6. That was not the worst. Your friend and co-host Brian Kibler was a -30 in his Dragons career, and he is dead last.
Well, you know what they say, if you
welcome to the
can't do pod. Thank you, Charlie.
Brian Kibler had 51 turnovers as a Dragon.
Charlie, you need to read better box score metrics more, because you got to know that plus minus is inherently biased against handlers. So
it's true.
You got to give Pat a boost in the plus minus category for that.
Where are my pole catching stats? That's what I want to see on there. I caught some nasty pulls when I was on the Dragons.
They don't have that, unfortunately. So no credit to be given. Pat, welcome to the show. You're also captaining Blueprint, as many would know, and congrats once again on last year's run. You guys are off to a solid start. Let's talk a little bit about how you think things went at PEC East.
Yeah, sure. You guys were both at my wedding a couple months ago, and thanks for both holding it down. And right after the wedding, went on a honeymoon to Portugal. And I had this really kind of unpleasant realization while I was there that, I'd never been on a sailboat before. And I was on a sailboat on like in the Lisbon harbor. It was like really nice. And I was like, oh man, the things that rich people are into like might be sick. They might be like really awesome. Like I got some fitted pants and I was like, oh no, like, this feels really good. And that's basically what it's been like being part of the TCT this year. We got to play at PEC and we were like, oh man, it's way better being part of the elite flight and getting to go to these awesome tournaments on like reasonable fields and playing really good teams. It was a lot of fun. It was a really great weekend. We had some high highs, some nice wins, a really good game with Machine, and also some lows. I think one of the lessons we learned is that when you have gotten to a higher level of play, your off games will just kill you. Like in previous seasons where we've been to lower level tournaments, we'll like have a bad game, and maybe that means that we only beat a team on Universe that we should have been beating by more. And we sort of learned that at this level, that if you have a game where you don't click, all of a sudden you're losing by 5. And so that was an interesting learning opportunity for us. But it's been a blast to get to play some elite tournaments this year. So happy to continue doing that at ESC later.
Currently, the Northeast is sitting on 6 bids. How are you feeling overall about the bid picture in the Northeast? It is obviously very early still.
I feel vindicated. I feel justified. I feel like this is just how it should be. Look, are there 6 teams in the Northeast that are unquestionably the national caliber? No, there's like 10. So 6 bids, I think, is reasonable, and we should just, that's fine. 7, I think 7 is acceptable. Wouldn't be absolutely crazy. But 6 I can live with. That's a deal I can take.
You haven't just taken a drink of the Kool-Aid. You put your head all the way in there and just started breathing it in. Really.
Pat embraces Canadian teams when it's convenient. Let's just note that right here.
Look, when Canadian teams get bids, I've got no qualms with them. Goat, Phoenix, both getting bids right now. Long may that continue. It's when they don't get a bid and come in that some animosity arises.
With the way that the regular season's going, I kind of wanted to ask. You're talking about the value of your team being at these top level tournaments. I mean, where do you feel like is the level of meaning that we have in the regular season? This is a topic that came up in our Discord. We were talking about, is the regular season structure still feel meaningful? It's like been a quest in the club season to make it feel like these tournaments really matter to these teams. What's from your vantage point? You're in the thick of it, fighting for bids. How do you feel like teams are approaching the regular season and the level of meaning that it has?
I think that Blueprint is in the sweet spot of where it's almost like the whole system is set up to make our season very meaningful, because we're going to be fighting for a bid. So every single game we play matters, and the tournaments that we're going to are full of teams that we either haven't played before, or we have a great chance to play a team like Machine or Sockeye at ESC or something like that. So I think for teams between like 12 and 25, the regular season is working perfectly. It's for everyone else that I think maybe has some issues, where you've got those top teams who don't have the same bid concerns necessarily, or been to all these tournaments before and it's a little old hat, or you've got the middle class who are not concerned about earning a bid necessarily and just want to get good games and play good teams, and they feel a little squeezed out. And I think if you're looking for like a unified theory of the club season, I do feel like it is the way that there's more stratification now between sort of the teams like 10 through 25 and the teams below them, just in terms of what their experience is. So from where I'm sitting, this is an incredible structure, an incredible season, but I can see that that's not the case for every other team.
Is there a way to get it so that the top teams have a feeling like it actually matters, or is it just not possible given the basic structure of the postseason in Ultimate?
Well, I think no one wants to lose to Blueprint, so that probably incentivizes teams to try hard at tournaments. No one wants to lose to some rise above their station team that is all of a sudden there, and it would be embarrassing to lose to us. Um, yeah, it does seem like the main motivating factor for some of these top teams is just avoiding, defeats, avoiding like embarrassing losses or something. Like no one like think about one of the most substantial regular season results of the past few years, and I think of Machine losing to Freaks at U.S. Open.
A true
And
classic.
you just kind of want to avoid that. In terms of like changing things to make it more substantial, I do think the move to push the TCT further back into the season and condense it a little bit more to have it conflict less with semi-pro play is a good one. I think the moving PEC from, I think it used to be in late June to now splitting it out into July, into East and West is good. But in terms of like having like a truly meaningful regular season, maybe change your definition of what meaningful is, or think about, how meaningful do you really want the regular season to be, as opposed to, I know Trelly, you've plugged, an expanded postseason, like almost like 8 years ago now, I wrote a potential super regionals pitch for the site. So it seems to me that it's going to be tough no matter what you do without changing the postseason structure to make the regular season more meaningful. Because the ideas of give an automatic bid to a team for winning US Open or something like that isn't an incentive that really matters. Like if the truck stops playing Machine in the finals of US Open, they know they're both going anyway. So like it doesn't really matter if they win that. And so it seems like you would have to do something to change the postseason structure of like, if you win a bid to, if you win US Open, then you get a bye to quarters, but would require a very different structure than what we have right now.
Yeah, hard to imagine a way that doesn't involve like really dramatically shifting the entire structure altogether. At least that's from my perspective, because you can't, unless you can find a way to just increase parity. Maybe that's like smaller rosters or something. Then maybe that pushes more good players onto various teams, makes it hard for top teams to collect a bunch of players. But we're kind of seeing teams skirt around that now by just like having 35 people on the team with 15 practice players or whatever. I mean, rosters are super weird right now, and I think it is a function and part of people not wanting to be in that. Like good players don't want to be in that middle class, like you said, of teams that are outside the nationals picture. Good players don't want to do that. They'd rather be a practice player or maybe a deep bench player on a team contending for nationals. Are you seeing the same thing with players like choosing? You were just a part of helping make a roster decision for a team that I also think seemed like they were fully in on having the gigantic roster situation.
Yeah, let's get into the practice player thing. Because I've been hearing a lot of grousing recently about these big graphics. Oh, there's too many names. I can't read them. I would say for starters,
that is not the grousing. That is not the grousing.
I do think that now that the roster release is a thing that every team is expected to do, you have to like either have someone who can do graphic design on the team or like pay someone you play league with to do it. It has put more emphasis on this idea of how big rosters are and everything. I think for a long time, teams had a lot of sort of quasi practice players or people who are around the team that now the ethic, and this is something Blueprint subscribes to, is you put them all on the roster because they're all a part of the team. They're all part of the season. Like we have some people on the Blueprint roster release who are, injured and are not, likely going to be able to play with the series, but they're still coming to practice. They're still part of strategy review sessions. And so they're part of the team. So they get to be on the roster release. And I think more teams are doing that. So it's not actually that there's been that many more people involved in the team before, just the way that it's presented is different. But I do think there are also just teams are taking more practice players as well. And that's, I think, a function of reduced good playing opportunities for mid-level teams, which then leads to people making the decision of like, oh, well, it'd be better to be on this team and get to learn more and have a chance of maybe I end up on the roster if something happens, because it's just less and less attractive to be a part of the middle class of Frisbee, which then leads to a downward spiral, right? Because as more people play or practice player on nationals teams, then competition gets worse and there's even fewer opportunities and the tournaments get worse for mid-level teams, and just chicken and egg, repeating itself. So I think you're onto something, that there's an issue here, but the issue is not big teams being selfish as much as I think it is structural problems that are making it less appealing to play on mid-level teams. Not to
wonder about these,
teams that have messed up tryout processes.
Is there a solution to make, because you've played on both sides of this, right? So this is your first time playing TCT universe, but you've played at SFI in the past, and you've played in the lower levels where you're not getting access to these top level tournaments that are bid out by USA Ultimate. And a lot of times these tournaments are just like not very well run, and they're like not particularly good. Is there a way to change that? Because this is still, the club season is an important revenue driver for USA Ultimate, and yet the experience for a lot of teams isn't that good. And I extend this all the way to regionals, where there's often been problems, especially in recent years, with the kind of quality level that you would expect of essentially the second highest level tournament of the season not really being there. And I feel like we need to figure out how to make that better, and not just have like the 5 tournaments a year that USAU like touches directly be acceptable. And I'm curious if you have thoughts on how to do that.
You guys have talked a lot about, I'm a listener of the show, and you guys have talked a lot about how there's a base level necessity to just have more money in the sport, because we're transitioning time where, a lot of people who are running tournaments who were doing it as part of the sort of like social cachet you get from being around, like the best teams and the best players in the sport. And, as I think you guys talked about, like the doom of party tournaments a couple episodes ago. And I think as we shift away from a era where there's more like social cachet to be had, and people are now sort of, like, I think just like money is what is what I require to do this. You're going to just need to pay TDs more. But you guys already know that. I think something new that could be thought about or could be done is, like working with some of the best local disc orgs that have some of the best organizational capacity. So WAFC, Disc Northwest, Minnesota, whatever the name of the organization is up there, and try to create some incentive structure for them to be running club tournaments. And because I think having the people who are good at organizing and know how to get permits and have like good ties to the community and can make these tournaments feel tied into the larger community and structure of the sport, while also incentivizing them through whatever incentive levers USAU has with these orgs, which I think, needs to be kind of rethought, is maybe one way to reintroduce non-TCT events that still feel meaningful and still feel like they're well run, and feel like it isn't just a bunch of people out on a crummy soccer field somewhere for a weekend.
I'm also curious for, we were talking about the way that the rosters are being built in this modern day. And we've seen a lot of teams taking on travel players, some of which are coming from outside of the country altogether. And I know Edward Stevens had a post on the site talking about how this is great for Ultimate, and there are some dissenting opinions in the Discord. There's comments where people are like, let's remove all roster restrictions, just free market. What do you think of how teams are bringing in these out of region players and these travel players, and USA use restrictions on those types of moves?
I would imagine that the restrictions went into place in an earlier time period where there was more like weird rostering violation stuff going on, where someone was, like pre-internet, where people were playing under multiple names so that they could play, on teams in different regions or whatever. So I'm not exactly sure what the rationale is for having, geographic restrictions. I guess like you want teams to be more a part of their community. It would kind of shock me if USAU's reason for doing this was to like foster local growth, although maybe that's a good reason to have the restrictions exist. So I don't really understand why we even have, like sectional or regional requirements. I don't know what your guys' opinions is on this. It seems like a way to have a sport that is already hard to manage administratively, just have one more logistical thing for teams to have to worry about that can maybe get them DQ'd from regionals.
I think
Yeah.
it's simply anti-super team.
Mhm.
Like you can't just have like all your elite player friends be like, hey, let's just, make a team with the best players from each of the top 10 cities in the US and go and mop everybody at nationals.
I mean, isn't that kind of what Space Heater did? I mean, they lost, I guess. Maybe they just needed like two more people.
Well, like Space
Or
Heater, number
they
one,
should
they
have
didn't
gotten an
win. Number
observer on the
two, they
team, I
were
guess.
DC people, right? They were pretty much all DC people.
I mean, kind of. I don't know. I feel like there were a lot of people living all over playing on that team. Claire Desmond was on that team. Um, no, I mean, I guess I'm not anti, having some sort of geographic restriction if there truly is like it's a sense of competitive balance or investing locally in the sport. But to have it doesn't make any sense for me to have it be, the kind of thing we saw some people talking about this that's preventing, particularly in the women's division where we've seen some issues coming in where it's, there's people who, live in Illinois, but the metro area that they're closest to is Milwaukee, but they can't play on the team because of regional boundaries and stuff like that. Like that, I feel like we have to figure out a way to have that not be a problem when we're talking about a club division that is like at best stagnating in membership. It seems like,
Yeah.
it seems like we should be like reducing barriers to people playing and not and putting them in arbitrarily.
On that, I think I agree. I think it's easy to say that if you live within a certain distance from a metro area or a region, that perhaps you can play in the other region, because like it doesn't make sense to say somebody who lives just outside of, a major metro area, but they're technically in a different region, can't play in their closest major metro, or that it would like count against the team and its regional requirements. That's, it doesn't make any sense. But
But how do you
that's
how do you
kind of a
feel
different.
internationally? Election year. Put your stamp on what your policy is on bringing in foreign players. You got to let the people know where you stand.
Listen, I think it's really fun to have the international players competing in the US series, but I do feel like if I was on a team that was not in like New York, San Francisco, or Boston, right? Like super major metros, I guess Denver's done quite well too. But uh, you know, if I lived in North Carolina or I lived in Midwest, I would be pissed. I would be like, this isn't fair. Like these teams just get to have these great players because they like met them at some party tournament and get to recruit them to their team. And I feel like, probably one of the things you could do is say that you can't just have somebody parachute in and play regionals and nationals, or even some cases just
Mm-hmm.
nationals. They should have to play at least a regular season tournament or something like that, just to make it feel like they're actually part of the team and not just like a ringer that you get to bring in for the postseason.
Well, if you want to get fired up and populist about it, which is a corner I used to occupy before I sold my soul to the TCT, I do think that a lot of it comes down to cost too, right? And that it's these teams who are willing often to spend a lot of team money flying in these players, housing these players, doing these things, and which makes it a little, like those same teams are then complaining that like nationals fees are too high or, whatever, when you're also spending thousands and thousands of dollars a year to bring in an elite player. I think that's part of it that rubs me the wrong way a little bit, is then it comes down to like what teams have the means or are willing to, spend a lot of money to bring people in. But I don't know exactly how you would enforce that other than having more of like a blanket ban on, as you said, like you can't have players just come in for XYZ. But then maybe that just further stratifies cost because it's like, okay, well, Machine has a dude who is a man in finance, trust fund, 6'5" blue eyes, and he's willing to, fly someone in for every tournament. So, then that the rich just keep getting richer. But I do think it speaks to some of the, not hypocrisy, but sort of ways in which I don't think the Frisbee community makes appropriate cost distinction decisions about what they view as like too expensive or not too expensive to allow for.
Look, we should just, if you made semifinals last year, you can't pick up anybody from Europe. How about that? Let's force parity into the mix. Let's get some new drama. You've hit the salary
I think
cap.
that is the answer to
Expansion
the college
draft
eligibility issue. Yeah. I mean, a international player like transfer pool draft where you're basically saying like, I will play. I want to play in the U.S. this season, but teams need to be willing to like pay for X amount of my services to do so or whatever. And you go in the pool, and then teams can like bid on players. This is really going the other way with like really putting more money into the sport.
Market economy. Market economy.
Market economy. Yeah.
If you don't live in the U.S., you go into the international player pool. There's a waiver wire.
Mm-hmm.
There's an ordered system based on your finish at nationals last year. But then there's a bidding process, so it's auction. And, every player gets auctioned to the highest bidder.
You cap how much you can spend in this process so that teams have to make decisions. Like it's not just the rich just get all the good players.
Yes. There's a salary cap.
Which one to get. And then if somebody wants to try and squeeze in to the salary cap, then they have to take a low bid. And that way, a team from outside of one of the majors can.
We're gonna need a mid-level exception. We're gonna need to have a first apron, second apron.
All of this just to give away hardworking American roster spots.
I feel like instead of bird rights, we call it bow rights. As one of the first true up for sale Frisbee players who was willing to relocate to New York for the compensation of business skills to play with the Empire.
I think it would be appropriate to honor
his legacy that way.
Bow rights.
I mean,
this isn't that bad.
She's gonna have to have a lot of opinions ridiculous. All of a sudden. It's not terrible. Yeah.
Pat, do you feel like a fraud not going to Wildwood this coming weekend? This is not who you are. This is not who you are.
I know. Like I sold my soul to the TCT. Well, so I'm actually in Wildwood right now. No joke. That's why I'm in this weird little beach house room because since I'm once again not going to Wildwood because of club team commitments, see previous Deep Look episode, Death of the Party Tournament, I decided it would only be right for me to go to the boardwalk and spend 8 hours in a dunk tank with Bud Light Lime so that people can, I can pay my penance. So yeah, if you want to go down to the stall, it's next to the Franconis on the boardwalk, kind of near the water park. You can have a couple shots at me and I'll deserve anything that happens.
I'm going to drive down there after the show.
I like that you didn't forget where you came from.
Batch 82 says in the chat that the Major League Baseball has international spending caps that can be traded as part of a trade. See, we got the big sports have already laid it out for us. All we got to do is just adopt. Pat, well, hey, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate having you. And what's your actual bid estimate for Northeast? How many will there be?
I think 4 is most likely, but I'm steeling myself for 2. And that's kind of
2.
I'm actually kind of excited about the idea of 2 and just, a real blood fest down there. So we'll see. And if it's more than 2, I'll be happy. But 4 seems about right for the strongest, best division in the history of the sport.
I have a couple quick hitters
Region.
for
Sorry,
you
not
as well.
division.
Keith, you can
Yeah,
jump in here too. Is Pony's title window closed?
Boy, I would like to be lauded for the bravery of even coming on the show now that I'm more directly competing against some of these teams for having to give them locker room material. No, I don't think it's closed. I mean, look at that roster. They still have like 8 Worlds players. I think they have to like figure out the composition of their lines in a way that is going to be different from the past few years, but I definitely don't think it's closed. Like there might
Keith
be
has
some like
absolutely
dudes
no
we've only
questions.
seen on might be some dudes we've only seen on D line before that they have to make the right choice about which one of those moves over to O and stuff like that. But once the Empire season ends and they're able to actually have people at practice full time, I think we'll have a better sense of what the team ceiling is.
Who's winning the UFA title?
I mean, I think probably the Empire. I know that they just lost again, but kind of until I see them actually lose in the playoffs, it's going to be hard for me to pick anyone else.
Who do you think is the best male matching player in the world right now?
Oh man, I do think the crown is up for grabs right now. I think it's never we've always sort of had the guy. If I have to pick just one, I mean, I think Jack is still really good. The problem is just that he cares more about UFA than he does club right now, it seems. So that almost disqualifies him because I think club is the highest level of the sport. Joe White is, I mean, would he survive 90s level hand checking? Who knows if people could still foul on the mark all the time. But given the current iteration of the game, he's an absolute monster. Chris Kotcher, still unbelievable. I think still underrated for how good he is and how good he's been for these pony teams. So I think that's one of the interesting questions about this year is like the crown for best player is a little bit up in the air.
Masters Nationals was this past weekend. Saw some absolutely brutal backpack bids. Should they let it happen at Masters?
Yeah, I think at Masters you've signed your life away. Like it's a death warrant going up there. I'll be playing Masters next year, and I'm very excited to backpack and be backpacked in turn, much like Christ asked of us.
And we'll end this on that note. Pat, thanks for being here. Good luck the rest of the Blueprint season, and we'll see you out there.
Thanks, y'all.
Pat Stegemoeller was here on Deep Look. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking UFA playoffs. We got some Masters chatter, and we got our question of the week. Stay with us. It's Deep Look.
Hey, this is Antoine Davis. You take the field with basically 2 things, yourself and your cleats. That's why you need the best on your feet. For me, I want a grip to handle my change of direction and stick with my person on defense. I want my cleat to be light to help me play long points and accelerate to get to my top speed. That's why I love my Toe-K cleats. They're specifically designed for Ultimate, with a cleat pattern for the game's sharp cuts and a durable, breathable, supportive build to keep your feet and ankles protected and comfortable for longer. That's why I've been using them for 3 years. They're my best ally on the field. You put your best self on the field, so make sure you're bringing the best with you at tokay-ultimate.com. That's TOKAY-ultimate.com. Toe-K, sky the limits.
Canadians, listen up. Breakmark is now shipping to Canada. The first 5 Canadian teams to purchase one of Breakmark's team bundles will get $10 off each bundle. And anybody from anywhere can still get their free reversible and 5-panel hat too. Head to breakmark.com now before your rival team beats you to it.
Welcome back to Deep Look. UFA regular season wrapped up this past weekend. We were waiting on a couple results, most notably in the Central, wondering what was going to happen with the final playoff spot in the Central. Madison waxed Indy, and they move on. They're going to be the 2 seed in the Midwest. And some other interesting results around the league. Atlanta tops Carolina, Keith, and New York gets smoked by the Breeze. They gave up 7 straight goals in the first half to DC to lose an early lead and never catch up.
The East took a turn. I mean, I remember in the middle of the season, we thought New York might be done. Boston was in the power position. After all that, New York bounces back. They start playing some of their best ultimate, and then they close with kind of a clunker against DC that now has the momentum behind them. And look, I know I always bring it back to the Scades, but they almost did it, Char. I know it was bleak for a little while there, but the final score, they closed the gap. They weren't totally out of it.
I mean, they have to feel at least some confidence having climbed all the way back into that game after getting absolutely trashed in the first half. They lose by 2, already on the road. You know you're going back there if you can get past Oakland, and they're going to be like, yeah, we can play better than we did in that first half. I think that regardless of the results of this final week, I still think that these are pretty toss-up games across the league going into the playoffs because the teams already knew they were in. They're not necessarily going to show all their cards. Winning isn't that important at that regular season game for everybody except Madison and Indy. So let's see what happens in the postseason. Like, would you bet on the 1 seeds winning every division?
As in moving on to championship weekend?
Yeah. That means you're taking Salt Lake, Atlanta, DC, and Minnesota.
Yes. I think just the history has shown is such a big advantage, but I definitely could see it. I definitely could see an upset happening, but it's been such a big advantage. Maybe that's conflated by the fact that the best teams tend to be the 1 seeds. But I think I would bet if I had to pick between the 2, 1 seeds all advance championship weekend, or there's an upset. I'm taking the 1 seeds.
I'll take the other side of that bet if you want. You want to put $10 on it?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
I'll take an upset somewhere.
As in, but one of the 1 seeds has to
all the
1 seeds. It doesn't matter if a 3 beats a 2.
Yeah, no. 3-2 doesn't matter.
Okay.
If all the 1 seeds advance, you win. If any non-1 seed advances, I win.
All right, you're on.
Lock it in.
Mark it down, producer.
Mark it
Lindsay Sue.
So the schedule coming up. They take a week off for the U.S. Open weekend. So we've got the first round of the playoffs coming up this weekend. And 3 games on Saturday, 1:00 Eastern, New York hosts, Boston hosts New York. 3:00 Pacific, Seattle hosts Oakland. And then 7:00 Eastern, Carolina hosts Austin. And then Sunday, 5:00 Central Time at Breeze Stevens, Madison will host Chicago. So quick picks. I'm going New York, Seattle, Carolina. Give me Madison at home.
Yeah, I'm also going to take New York, man. That the hardest one for me is Madison, Chicago, I think. I don't know that I really believe in either team. So I definitely have trouble with that division in particular. I also I feel like I have to take Seattle now, even though I liked Oakland coming into the season. I actually liked Oakland more than Seattle. Let me take a quick look just in case. How's Oakland? What's Oakland been up to lately? Can I talk myself into them? I mean, they're playing pretty well. They lost a game to LA, like 3 weeks ago. That's when they lost it to LA and San Diego back to back. But
They've
they won 3
split
straight.
one goal.
All
They
good
split one
margins.
goal games. Both games, 22-21. Oakland lost at home and won on the road.
Yeah,
They've
it
already
gives you
beaten
some
Seattle
confidence
at
that they can win
Seattle.
on the road.
They
I
definitely
think that Seattle's gonna be amped up. Man, it feels so antithetical to pick against them after hyping them up. But you know what? Sure, let's do it. Let's get some more differentiation. Okay, so I'll take Oakland, New York,
Wow.
Carolina,
Keith is ride or die
and
for Seattle
Chicago.
all year.
That is not
And then
true.
he
I was
says
not right.
goodbye.
I just said that they could beat the Shred, and they failed to do that. I still think they could. Let's get some spice. Chicago, New York, Carolina, Oakland. That's where we're going.
All right. So UFA playoffs start next weekend. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a very interesting year. Wide open title race. Masters Nationals was this past weekend in Colorado. Only a little bit of lightning delay getting things kind of mucked up. Some exciting games, some really exciting games. The mixed Masters final was fantastic. If you're like, I don't care about any of this, you could go watch that one. It was really good. Atlanta versus Fort Collins, basically like the old shame. Very good game. No spoilers. Keith, never mind. Gigantic spoiler. Huge spoiler right in the middle of your screen. This is a news podcast. I don't know what I'm talking about. No spoilers. Regret in the Masters mixed division does take it down on Universe. Great game, Keith.
Some regret in this room right now.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah. Look, the Masters players showed out. There was some other stuff going on that you mentioned during Pat's interview, but we got some good games and obviously talented players. We kind of knew that coming in. I think the quality of play in Masters seems to get higher, and I think our expectations have kind of risen with that. And you get the showdown in the men's division. You get Voltron and Boneyard. They kind of crushed on their way there, but a good game between the two
rematch
them,
of last year
in the final. Yep. I mean that was there really reason to expect much different? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. Voltron wins it 15-12.
Go ahead.
That's a nasty team right there. I don't have any more on it. Just they're a very, very good team.
Yeah, I mean their roster stacked. I think that there was like a credible threat in the form of Boneyard, but that Voltron team, I mean their roster is like just very talented. I think they would do quite well if they went to prime regionals.
I was talking to Matt Rader, who played for Voltron at the Minnesota New York game, and he was like, I don't know, like I'm not sure we're going to be able to do it because Boneyard like tries and practices, and you know what, talent wins out in this sport. That's what I'm saying. All right, Stello wins over Pumas in the women's division. So hey, is this the Ottawa title? Is this the first time a Canadian team has won this tournament? I'm not going to say that. I have no idea, but feels like it could be.
And I'm not going to try and answer it because I also don't have an idea. But look, they were the 2 seed coming in. I still had no idea what to expect from them because this was a little bit a different field than usual. I did think Pumas was going to be pretty good, but I didn't see Stello roll into the championship coming.
Johnny Walker over Rusted Metal 14-13. So that's Denver over basically Boston. Cricket cooked. Jeff Graham cooked, but it wasn't enough as Johnny Walker got the job done. Ryan Morgan was balling. Bart Watson was balling. The names of the past, Keith.
Yeah, for
still
real.
good.
Still got it. They still got it.
Yeah, definitely. Surly GMX beat Nothing's Getting Younger, aka Baby Maker, in Grandmasters Mixed. Grandmasters Women's 15-14, Wisconsin Bitter over Molly Blue on Universe. Now let's take a look, because Robin Fennig, playing for a very stacked Wisconsin Bitter team, just did this. Let's roll it. This is Universe, Keith. Molly's got the disc. Bingo, bango. Robin, layout D on the up line. Look at this play. Oh, my God, dude. Still got it. And then going the other way, Wisconsin Bitter, a little high release backhand. Cashing it in. What a win.
And the bad big doggo is silent on that one. Silent. Dog.
There were some similar bids that were not so that the watchdog had to bark at. And then let's see. Did they just not play the GGM game? What? That must just not be reported. I don't know what's going on with that. Per Sisters beat the Silver Sisters in Great Grandmasters Women's. Per Sisters out of San Francisco. And the men's game is not reported. Oh, yes, it is. Just not showing its final. Surly GGM beats Graveyard 15-11.
Congratulations to the winners. I kind of want to make it out to Masters one day. Team Ultiworld goes to Masters.
Apparently, it's incredibly fun. Now I know more people now, as someone who is now Masters age, as you are, Keith, that are going to the tournament, and it just sounds like great fun.
It would be so bad to finally form Team Ultiworld for a true tournament, but it's Masters, and so we don't even get all the really good people.
All right, it's time to get to our question of the week. Keith, what do we got?
All right, this week's question of the week comes from Cody in the Discord, and it's less of a question, more of a statement. But we'll just add thoughts ? Onto the end of this. A proposal: AUDL should play 2-3 set style games.
Hit the buzzer.
Or time.
Yes.
Oh,
buzzer.
I was duped. I was duped by the actual question asker saying AUDL, but I did get
UFA, Keith.
UFA. Look, this is not that I was duped by this. I read the teleprompter. It was to points time instead of to 4 quarters of the same game. So instead of doing just 4 quarters, doing a sets and styles thing, and that was a set style game. So you're playing like best of 3,
like tennis,
instead of What do we think?
Cody also said, and of course should play on a 40-yard wide field, which let's not open that can of worms. But
yeah, I wasn't touching that.
Noted. Look, because of the nature of Ultimate scoring style, which is heavily slated towards offense and hold rates in the UFA, I'm just going to pull up the 2024 stats. Okay. Hold percentages in the UFA are mostly, for the teams that are not awful, like middle of the pack and up, are 65-ish% up to about 70%. So you're holding most of the time. What are the tennis hold rates? I think they're a lot higher. Some people have a 90% career hold rate. I'm assuming people with like tremendous first serves. Andy Roddick's on that list, not surprising. Tall. If you're a great server, right, you're going to have a chance to hold at a high percentage. But regardless, right, I think the idea is that if you have a heavy slant towards offense, it can be more interesting to kind of reset the clock, if you will, and give defenses an opportunity to look for those breaks without it having to be one continuous streak. I kind of like the idea of seeing how the game would be different if you just, let's say you come out slow and you give up a couple opening breaks, and you know what? Sometimes you throw in the towel. We see that happen in tennis, and you say, let's play the next one. I think it naturally mercy rules teams that are bad against teams that are good, because you just win in straight sets and it's over. And you don't have as much garbage time, like naturally. I think, volleyball is played in sets, very good, similar, probably kind of hold rates to Ultimate. a lot of sports where there's a real advantage to starting with the disc or the ball or the implement or whatever are played in sets. I don't see why Ultimate should be considered any different.
Well, somebody has tried this, right? There was an Australian semi-pro league, I believe, that attempted this format maybe like 5 years ago.
Yes.
So we've seen it. We've seen it. That's the only time I think I've heard of this.
No, you are wrong. Wildwood finals in every division is played best 2 sets out of 3. And it's awesome. It's super fun. Because as a player, it's fun too. Because if you lose the first set, you're bummed, but you're like, we're still in it. If you go down 4 breaks in the first half, you often just have that sense of like, we have no chance to win this game.
And it, like, at this point, if you basically make it so 2/3 of the game feels like decisive, right? Like automatically somebody's going to be up 1-0. And so the other team is already potentially going to lose. And so there's basically like drama for the rest of the game.
Exactly.
It's an interesting experiment. Somebody in the regular season just got to test it out. USA,
I mean, we could easily do this in club.
Ultimate's permission. I mean, you could do it a high school national invite. Nobody could stop you.
We could. That's true. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that's the spot to be like, we're changing the rules entirely.
How about
I think it would be fun.
Consolation? How about just
in finals? Like, if you just did finals, it would be interesting. I don't know.
People are not going to like it getting to the
final
final and having to do things different. But in consolation, they might be willing to experiment.
And I don't think it really decreases the drama of the end of the game, because if it's tied 1-1 and you're going into the third set, that's naturally going to be exciting. And there's less time to like pull away, right? Because these games would be to what? I don't know what you do for UFA, whether you do it by time or you do it by score. There's kind of pros and cons to both. But if you did this in club, right, you would play sets to probably 5, right? That'd be kind of equivalent to playing a game to 15. And so it's like 1 set to 1, first to 5. Like, essentially you're at a 10-10 game, which is exciting automatically. Even if a team goes up a break or 2, it's still exciting. You completely eliminate the horrible ends of games where the score is like 12-5 and everyone's just waiting for the game to end.
It's interesting. I think so. I'm down for somebody to experiment. Del Rico in the chat says best of 3 games to 7 should be our standard. And Emmett Holton says that he loves to start with the implement, which is a fair point.
The implement. Listen, this is just one of many rule changes that I think about all the time. And we're going to talk about more possible rule changes. We got a kind of a heated debate going in the Discord this week when I posted in the mailbag channel. I forget what the specific prompt was. Let me go back and check. Do we need more dramatic rule changes to change the current boring meta of Elite Ultimate? This is based on a conversation I was having with somebody in a text message thread. And I suggested like shorter stalls, a higher level of permitted contact by defenders, or other adjustments. This is now a very deep, long thread in the Discord, and we are going to discuss it more in our subscriber bonus segment out the back right after this, live in the Discord. So if you're watching, join us over there. If you don't have a subscription yet, now is the time. Ultiworld.com/subscribe. Super easy to connect your account to the Discord and get involved in our Discord conversations. Check out all the live pods that we do for subs and a whole lot more. And hey, watch Junior Worlds. It's going to be an awesome finish down the stretch here this week in the UK. For Keith Rayner, I am Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we will talk to you next week, Tuesday, noon Eastern, right here on Deep Look.